All right, welcome to a special live edition of Tuba Da Vinci. Today I'm joined by a really awesome special guest, Lacey, who is Miss Go Electric. If you haven't seen her channel, you got to definitely check it out. Lacey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You want to do a little introduction and tell people about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. So I actually have been in the automotive industry on the experiential marketing and training side of the business. And over the past decade, I have been working with OEMs and dealer groups to do product launches. So every time a new product comes out for a brand, I go out in the field and either help train their staff and dealers and other subcontractors and the public on the products, whether that be in dealership or at events across the country and a little bit overseas in Europe too. I can't hear you.
Sorry. So you're actually kind of an insider. You work with the companies that we talk about in passing. So that's kind of why I wanted to have you on to talk about our topic today, which is we talk about this future of electrification. I think pretty much every company understands that the future is going to be electric. But who has the advantage? Is it startup companies, the Rivians, the Lucids? Tesla's kind of, they're not really a startup anymore. They're just dominating it. They're rolling out factories seemingly on the monthly, or legacy makers, the Volkswagens, the General Motors, and Fords. And I think you should have a really unique perspective. I'm actually really curious what your take is on this. So I guess we can just jump right into it. What do you think? Who has the advantage? Who's going to prevail in the next 5 or 10 years?
So it's not a 100% clear answer, in my opinion, because there are pros and cons on both sides of the spectrum here. So you have the legacy automakers, which obviously have the ability to scale at unprecedented amount of numbers in comparison to some of these EV startups. I mean, EVs are still about 3% market share in the US, so it's still small, and globally it's under 10%. So you do get these cases where in like Norway, it's like over 80% now, which is really exciting. But the reality of the fact is that we're still in the early stages, even though, Tesla is close to being in existence for about 20 years. And so you would think with that much experience that, it's bigger than what it really is. And the impact right now, it is huge. That's what's exciting right now, is that we are seeing that Tesla has made this case that it is worth investing in EV technology and chassis and production and manufacturing at this point, because it is the future. It's not just because these EV startups are starting to push these legacy automakers to realize, hey, take notice. This is the future. People do want this. So you need to invest now. And so we have GM and Ford and a lot of these, the big three really starting to put a lot more money in. But the problem with legacy auto is that they move pretty slow. They're not as quick as an EV startup, where they don't have all these systems in place that the bureaucracy would prevent them from moving at a quicker pace and innovation in that same conversation. But then you also have the EV startups that they're very nimble, but they're also limited as well because of their scale. So dealers, on one hand, are a big impact when it comes to this conversation too, because the EV startups do not have that holding them back on the sales side of things. And with this direct sales model, it opens up more efficient means to get the products to the consumers. So you still have some push and pull there, because some states are not really playing ball when it comes to direct sales in a lot of cases. And so we need to kind of open the gates there from the direct sales perspective for those EV startups to really proliferate more and more. So it's the interesting side of things, is that you have legacy auto, which is really great at manufacturing. EV startups, they're still in their learning curve and have a lot of hiccups that they experience. you have the sales and service side of things, where we've heard that EV startups, from the limited perspective that we have right now from the people that are actually producing products, there is a struggle there to make sure that the customer experience is great. And then, of course, being able to move quickly, that's a big part of it.
So let's start with, well, before we start with that, there was a super chat from Robert Klauko. Thank you, Robert. As always, we love you. You're a huge supporter of the channel. He says, just to support the channel, looking forward to learning from your guest. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. You guys want us to talk about or bring up your questions and stuff, super chatting would be awesome. We'd appreciate it. So let's talk with the first thing you said, the dealer network. My neighbor, the person who lives right behind me, her name's Parker, and she has had a chance recently to drive an ID4 that I had and my Tesla Model 3. She loved both cars. And in her mind, she went with the ID4 because with the incentives and stuff, it was more affordable. Also because the dealer network. She said, I just feel more comfortable knowing there's people around I could just go over. And I kind of told her, like, Tesla's got mobile service. They've got more locations. It's not so... But she went with the ID4. She loves the car, and it's a really nice car. I like the ID4 myself as well. It's a cool color that she got. But the funny part is when I got my Tesla, it was like 15 minutes in and out. It was such a breeze because a lot of the paperwork and all the preliminary stuff was done before I even got there. For her, she got there and there was this little software bug. And so the guy said, you got to bring it back to us. But, these cars are not everywhere, so she had to drive about 100 miles to pick up her car. And so she says, well, can I just take it home and take it to my local VW dealership to the software upgrade? And they said, no, there's some proprietary reason, which is total BS. There could be no reason for this. So believe it or not, she had to drive back for this. And then they also found that like the tail light had one of the bulbs, one of the lines, like an LED bar, was out. Similar thing. The guy tells him, you got to bring it back to this shop in X, Y, and Z. And she kind of called BS and took it somewhere else and called somebody else. And they said, yeah, we can get the part and we can get it in for you. No problem. So the dealership network is a complete mystery to me. I don't know if people will see it as a good thing or a bad thing. It is really right in the middle. I do think some people will find comfort in it, but I think it's also really irritating. And I'll be honest with you, for me, I think having to go to a dealership would preclude me from buying that car anymore. Maybe I'll buy it used, like third hand, but I really hate the dealership network. I don't like dealing with it. It takes hours, and dealing with these salespeople who are trying to like price gouge you and stuff. It's a bad incentive model, in my opinion. So what's your take? I'm curious what people in the comment section are going to say too, but it's a really hit or miss thing.
I'm interested too, because the thing about this is that they are a middleman. The reality of the fact is that they are a middleman, and the automakers make the money on the sale to the allocation to the dealership. And then the dealerships make over 40% of their profits on service. And how that works is not only through, repairs over time and things, but also like Ford pays, say, for example, a Ford dealership, Ford pays a lot of money towards warranty repairs. So every time you get a car fixed, the dealer is making that money off of I'm not saying people are being fraudulent in the fact of how many hours they spend on getting a warranty repair, but I'm just saying there's a lot of extra room for there to be places where they can make more money in this case. So service centers are a huge profit model in the dealership. And if you eliminate, like Tesla has, the ability to go through a third party, you're saving money to an extent. But also, we've heard that there have been issues with the customer experience from Tesla's side of things. But I think ultimately the fact is that the consumer should be able to choose whether or not they want to buy a direct sales model, a product from an automaker, or if they want to go to a dealership. There are going to be, like you said, people that want to have the security of something that they've known that's existed for a long time, which is the dealership model. And that's totally fine. And we're starting to see more and more dealers actually across the country offer a pickup and delivery type service, because sometimes it's mandated by the brands. So they give them a certain amount of funds to be able to make sure that their dealer network can provide these services to their customers and set up all the infrastructure that needs to happen behind it, whether it's part of the digital key or app-based systems that these automakers provide. So on one hand, I do think that direct sales is going to spread across the country, and more as we see younger buyers dab into more of these premium products, because the fact is right now a lot of EV brands out there that are startups offer a premium product, and that is strategic. It's for a reason. The luxury or premium segment has a higher profit margin, and that's also why you see not only are SUV models popular in America because Americans like SUVs and a lot more space, like to sit up higher, but also it is more profit once again for the automakers. So as we start to see more high volume, lower, like an entry level model that's more economical, I think it's going to be a really big impact on the direct sales model, because we'll be able to get obviously a lot more volume from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kyle Connor is in the house. If you guys haven't, yes, yeah, Lacey knows who that is. If you guys haven't checked out Kyle's channel, I just put a chat in there. This is a link to his video where he reviews the Model S Plaid. Really good question from Kyle. Kyle says, from which type of automaker would you both personally feel more comfortable purchasing a car? A previously established automaker or a newer startup? So I'll take this one first, Lacey, if you don't mind. So this is a really good question, and I completely understand it, right? I have a lot of friends who say that when Honda builds an electric vehicle, that will be when I get an electric vehicle. For them, this idea that Honda is this company that they trust, or Toyota, those are the two that here in California, Honda and Toyota are really, really popular. They come to mind. So like when Toyota builds an EV, then I'll be interested. I understand the sentiment for sure. This is a car. This is not like an iPhone where if it is buggy or doesn't work well, you just toss it and get a new one. This is like a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 car, and you'd hate for it to be of poor quality. So for my personal experience, I have a 2020 Model 3 Performance. It has 34,000 miles on it. So far, I have changed I refilled the windshield washer fluid, and I recently changed the cabin air filter. Other than that, I haven't done anything to the car. It's been perfect. Now, I do understand. I'm on Twitter often, and I see that there's other people who have had problems. For example, here's an interesting example. The new Model 3s come with a power lift trunk, right? Mine didn't. Mine is manual. So one of my friends, Ryan, who runs a channel called The Kilowatts, he noted that using that automated trunk, there's actually this panel gap that was starting to form on the trunk line where the kind of the C pillar to the trunk line, and it was growing and growing. So he had to take it into service for them to kind of button that up. These are the kinds of things a company that's making a car for the first time, adding new features on the fly, are going to encounter. So I do understand that. I personally, at this point, I trust Tesla. For me, Tesla is not a concern. Now, if I was buying a Rivian or a Lucid, I might have to, all right, $80,000, $100,000 for a car that's being built for the first time. I'd have to think about that. So I get your point, Kyle. I do. I think there is a point. When I drove the ID4, that thing was buttoned up. It felt like a really mature car. So I do understand that. The software is a little more boring, right? So there's a trade-off. But I'm curious what people in the comment section think. And thank you, Kyle, for the super chat. Really appreciate you. And what do you think, Lacey? What would you be comfortable buying a car from just some brand new company that has been around for a couple of years?
So yes, but it, like you said, it comes with the territory that you have to understand that you are an early adopter and that these are new products that are coming out from new companies. So not everything might be peachy. So like you, I have a Tesla Model S, and I have a 2016 90D, and I've had them show up to my driveway to do a couple of small repairs, including the door handles, because that is a common thing in the Model S, where the little wires snap. So I've had replacement of the door handles, but otherwise that's it. And I have 83,000 miles or so on it. So I'm very comfortable, and I really like the convenience factor of being able to have someone just come to my driveway. I don't even have to give them the key or anything. I can unlock it remotely. So for me, I love that, and the ability to get on with my life and not have to concern myself with a service appointment and going somewhere else to have it done. So that is a huge factor for me. But honestly, it's really about personal preference. Like, I do have a pre-order on an R1T, and I ordered a max pack, so with hopefully over 400 miles of range. But that is going to be on the second batch of manufacturing, because right now with the launch edition, they're doing the smaller pack, normal size, which is going to be around 300. And so that was kind of my way of like, okay, ordering and feeling somewhat confident in this brand that's a new automaker that is making a really awesome product that seems super usable. And from the reviews, it makes me even more excited just seeing how awesome it's performing and handling. And the reality of the fact is like, made sure to order not only because I wanted more range, but something that comes a little bit later in the manufacturing process, that hopefully those smaller tweaks can be made by the time that, you know, they get to that point. They say that at the beginning of the year is when they'll start delivering those. We'll see. We'll see if they are staying on target. They're definitely got their hands full with R1S too. So I do have confidence, but I also understand the other side of the coin, like you said, Ricky, is the early adopters. You get a lot of innovation, not only from like a software perspective and the ownership experience and driving the vehicle, but you also have just a lot of security on the dealer side of things. So it's really, you have to just weigh your options here, whether you're going to be okay with things being maybe subpar, if you're willing to take that chance in an EV startup.
So, Kyle, again, thank you. Kyle says, thanks for the insight. I'm toying with the idea of going for a Rivian or a Taycan. And to be honest, not knowing how Rivian will hold up over time or be serviced gives him some pause. I can understand that. Robert Klauko says, I would not go for Tesla, even though I love their products. Their stand toward right to repair is a no-go for me. This kind of gets interesting too. Say what you will about the dealership network. They're kind of forced to open up their cards and give, repair manuals and spare parts and stuff to these guys. And then as a result, third parties, like the random, corner neighborhood shops that repair cars pop up as well. So we do need all that. I agree with that entirely. We can't have like Tesla mobile service be the only option in town. That won't scale when things get really big. So I'm a firm believer on the right to repair as well. I can hear that. I think Kyle wants a Taycan, and I think you should definitely get one, Kyle. Just who are you kidding? Just go get that Taycan. I know you want one. And I don't blame you. I think it's an amazing car as well. So, but the other thing too for me is there's a difference between a company that has like a promise of a car and reservations, and then there's companies that have factories and are gonna build cars. Like, to me, Lucid and Rivian are a little bit different because they've gone through the hard part of raising all this money and all the crazy stuff. Now they're building cars. They're gonna still have a lot of growing pains, like, make no mistake about it. Going from making 10, 20 cars a week or a month to building, thousands of cars a month is going to be a growing pain that both companies will still go through. I do believe that. But at the same time, they're kind of here. I don't know if you ever remember the Elio Motors car. Did you ever remember that one? I always liked that car. About 10 years ago, I thought this is kind of a brilliant move. 80 miles a gallon. That never materialized. It never came to be, right? So that's the risk you take, especially if you put a large deposit down that you never get your car built. But to me, like Rivian and Lucid, I think early cars, there might be issues. But is it such a big deal? If you love new stuff, like if you're the guy who gets the latest iPhone, I'm kind of curious how many people in the comment section already have the latest iPhone, the iPhone 13. I didn't even know it came out until recently. But those people, I think, would be okay if like the occasional door handle has to be replaced, and like the repair service people have to come out and change a part or two. That's not the end of the world. I think the coolness of something so cutting edge or great definitely makes up for itself. Like the Lucid Air is a really cool car. The Rivian R1T is a freaking amazing truck. These are things that might be worth that price. I guess it just depends on everybody. Thank you, Jonathan Brown, for the super chat. Really appreciate you. He says, looking forward to upgrading my Bolt to a Model 3. And that is a perfect segue into this perceived idea that legacy makers are somehow so great. I had a friend who recently bought a Honda Civic or a Honda Accord, and because they didn't trust Tesla, they didn't think Tesla was ready, and they've already been in the shop a couple times for the same issue. And I'm thinking, dude, my car hasn't been in the shop in 3 years, and you're buying the perceived value brand, right? The same thing for the GM. How many people bought the GM Bolt compared to the Tesla Model 3 because they thought, oh, Tesla can't be trusted. Who knows what they're doing out there? And there are signs that say, do not bring your Bolt into this parking structure now. It's crazy, right? That never happened to any of the Tesla cars. I mean, they've had little issues here and there, but increasingly it feels like the world is upside down. The Teslas, the guys that know what they're doing, and these other companies are kind of struggling or reeling. What do you think? Is it even a fair assessment? Is there anything about electric vehicles that really give legacy automakers even an advantage beyond factory space? But even then, they do have to retool and stuff. Is that really even an advantage?
I mean, I do think manufacturing is I know that there's been R&D in a process, and for example, getting to production for the F-150 Lightning, and they redid the factory I'm actually in the Detroit area, so a little bit south of me, the Rouge plant. They redid part of that in order to accommodate and produce F-150 Lightning out of there for the time being. But I do think that they have manufacturing down to a science there, even if you are introducing new technology, and they can move a lot quicker in that sense on being able to get that moving smoothly and efficiently. Whereas it is quite a bit more of a struggle, and there's no doubt that the EV startups have a lot of grit and determination, and we've seen it before, setting up tents outside to get a Model 3 production rolling as hard as possible. But the fact is that there's also a lot of capital investment in these OEMs do have a lot of capital to be able to invest, which is an advantage. But on the other side of the coin, they also have spent a lot of money on their existing plants in infrastructure and R&D on their, powertrain, existing ICE powertrains and things of that nature that they're required to, make sure that they're getting the most out of those investments, return on investment, especially when it comes to these public traded companies where that's a requirement. That's their fiduciary duty. So it's kind of a, two-way street here where, although they do have a lot of capital investment to put towards this technology, they also are kind of stuck on the other side of it on how fast they can move because of their current investments. So it's not a clear line because we have seen legacy auto like Ford invest in Rivian, and it's happened in the past. Like, to be really honest, I think that there's going to be quite a bit of consolidation that's going to eventually happen through all of this shift because, back in the early 1900s, the same concept kind of happened when Ford made the assembly line and started mass producing, and these bigger brands were able to convert and make it a lot more of a streamlined process. Well, that's when GM bought up Cadillac and Buick and, consolidated a bit more to still have those brands, but to, be able to still compete. So there's going to be consolidation. I don't know how it's going to play out because it will be interesting for people or brands like Toyota, who are behind in the movement, where they're going to sit. Are they going to be able to buy themselves out of their way through suppliers in order to catch up, or are they going to be too far gone? So it's historic and interesting times right now. I'm just so glad to be a part of it because it is fascinating to see, especially now with all these big legacy makers dumping in, millions and close to billions of dollars of investment to switch to electric.
So here's a question for you. So thank you again, Robert, for the second super chat. He says, I wonder how the Bolt communication fiasco is impacting the legacy automakers compared to like EV startups. So if you look at, I think General Motors wants to be electric more than anybody else. They seem to have this vision that they're going to be the leader in 10 years. They're saying all this stuff, but I mean, their history is not great. Like recalling and crumpling EV1s to the Bolt thing now. What do you think? How bad is what's happening? There are people who don't want EVs because they don't trust them or they don't think they're going to last. They think the batteries are like your iPhones; they'll stop working after 2 years. And now the fire thing is like the worst thing that could have happened, right? And it didn't happen to Tesla; it happened to General Motors, which
Well,
really
it
does
also
suck. But what do you think?
it did happen to Hyundai right before. So the
True.
thing is like, it's bad for all EVs, and that really like hurts me as an advocate because I'm very passionate about it. But the reality of the fact is, it doesn't just hurt legacy; it hurts the EV startups too, because it makes people have an extra layer of thought behind that. They don't have the safety and security to think this isn't going to catch on fire or explode or whatever. And you know we can't have that. Like the fact is that there are so many more gas vehicles that combust in comparison to EV vehicles. And because this is like headlining news,
Yeah, the
the
gas
reality of
cars don't make the news.
it is rare even so, and the scale is low in comparison to just all the cars on the road. But yeah, I mean, Bolt was they were required to take all 140 some odd thousand bolts and put them into a recall. And I think that was the right choice, just in case, because we have to get rid of that stigma, because it's and to be honest, like way back in the day, when Tesla was working with their battery suppliers, the conversation did come up. Like they actually went specifically with Panasonic in order to move forward with the manufacturing process, because the liability factor, like LG Chem, such a huge company at the time, Tesla wasn't. So who are they going to go after? LG Chem. And so legally, it just was the right decision to, tighten things up and go with a partner that was more willing to trust in the confidence of the engineering and the, pack designs and all that from Tesla. So it's not exclusive to legacy auto. That's a fact, but it affects all EVs. And generally speaking, I do believe that for the general public, EVs should be the answer for them, because the lifestyle, the total cost of ownership is just a lot better, in my opinion. And there are still going to be some people that are like, I can't just jump to it because of the sound and the road feel, and that's fine. But generally speaking, I do believe that the general public needs to make the switch.
So one of the people I want to have as a guest is Jordan from The Limiting Factor. Does really good
Yeah,
videos about the battery stuff.
very
I wanted
good.
to ask him
Yes.
this question. Some person wrote, and not some person, his username is some person. Some person writes, the F-150 uses pouch cells. Elon warned all automakers not to do that, that they have an issue with thermal runaway effects and other issues. So what's your take on this one? This one to me stands out as maybe the most compelling reason for like Elon's brilliance or what Tesla did. Everybody else is going pouch. Kyle mentioned the Taycan. It's a pouch cell battery. All the LG Chem stuff is pouch. Whereas Tesla's just always gone, cylindrical. They were 18650, then they're 2170s. Now they're going 4680, but they've always been cylindrical. Have you looked into this much, or like, do you have an opinion about this? It's,
I understand why they're going for a pouch versus a cylindrical cell. A cylindrical is not as energy dense technically, and the safety factor really is the complexity is a little bit more simplified with a cylindrical cell in comparison. So, but it is an easier point of entry for a lot of these automakers, so they're willing to take the risk to do a pouch cell in comparison. But that investment is why it's preventing them from making that choice. But I believe Lucid actually is doing cylindrical.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So there are some that are, going in that direction, but
But again, it's kind of the trend of the topic, which is
it's an investment.
what are all these startups doing, kind of thinking about it one way, and why is every legacy player going the other way with pouches, right? That's an interesting question, I think.
Well, yeah, and it does come down to capital, I think, but the long term, investment, if you are someone like a Tesla or a Rivian, I think it's a smarter choice because, of the long term. But these legacy automakers can switch suppliers at pretty much, any time and make the switch if they need to. So for them, they'd rather spend less money now and then shift as they invest in their factories and their new battery factories and things of that nature to get to a point where, long term, those bigger scale, more highly intensive costs products are worth it. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just kind of going through the comments. So Ben Pena says BYD makes a blade battery that doesn't catch on fire. So there's a lot of variables to this. Like it could even just be the company's thermal management systems and cooling systems. But the blade battery in particular, I believe, is a lithium iron phosphate chemistry, which is a very safe battery. And Tesla does use those on some of their lower range models. And I think lithium iron phosphate is going to be very popular in the future. Anything that's bigger and doesn't need 500 miles of range, I think will start to slowly move toward that route. You do lose energy density, but it's such a safe battery. And it lasts way longer. You could easily get a couple of million miles from lithium iron phosphate. I've heard like between 3,000 and 5,000 charge cycles compared to closer to 1,000 for the more intense lithium ion chemistries like NMC or NCA.
And so the other side of that, though, is that GM is in a partnership with LG Chem, and LG Energy Solutions has a facility actually here in Michigan where they are constructing these packs. So yes, BYD has those the blade configuration, but it's the manufacturing process in putting the pack and modules together that's causing the problem, because when it is integrated, they're having issues with the separator and the anode, either tearing or folding or whatnot. So it's not necessarily that like the design can't be safe and sound. It's that it gets damaged in the process of the manufacturing. So you have to be able to make sure that you are, when you're introducing new parties, so it's not just LG because they're not making their own vehicle and they're not putting this into their own product. They're working together with GM. And that's where the introduction of the issues come into play, because they don't have like sole control of going into the chassis. So in the modules and packs. So where like BYD mostly supplies to their own product line. So they have a lot of control.
That's a good point. There are a couple of questions I wanted to talk about. One of them is about Nissan. So Ben Penny says Nissan has been very stable. They don't have thermal management. They don't even have a thermal management system. How, can somebody explain this to me? So the one problem with Nissan's approach is they've had terrible issues with degradation. I remember the early Leafs, and I think even the newer Leafs, but maybe to a lesser extent, they lose a ton of range very quickly. And so that's their problem with not having a thermal management system. You're right. You haven't really heard much about Leaf fires. There probably were some, but it hasn't been a runaway issue at all. So clearly there's something safer about what they're doing with their approach, but their problem is degradation. These cars lose all their value so quickly. Like, for example, I remember there was a point when a new Nissan Leaf, let's say it was $40,000 in 2012 or so. 3 years after like a lease return, from $40,000, you could get one on Craigslist for like $12,000. That is horrible. And if EVs had that kind of depreciation, they would never catch on. But Tesla is the opposite. Like, I think my car is worth more money than I paid for it 3 years later in 30,000 miles, because it's just in such a demand. So while they haven't caught fire, they have other problems, and Nissan is not a good example of how to do it right, in my opinion.
They've had to spend a lot of money replacing packs, and that is
true.
the hard thing for Nissan is that they they did a pretty good job with the Leaf, but they have had to dump so much money into replacing packs for customers and for resale. So
Exactly. And then next question is from GRR. He says, if the new EV companies, do the new EV companies have to push through the same production hell that Musk and Tesla did when they to stand a chance, or was that like a first mover disadvantage that others can learn from? You want to take that one first?
now everyone's going to have to go through production hell, as they call it. It's like if you have good people on your team that have come and seen the issues or that have come from legacy automakers and know that these are the things that you need to look out for, then you might have a greater chance of avoiding any kind of catastrophes. But manufacturing, I just like everyone talks about it. It is so hard. Like there are so many moving pieces. There's just a lot that can go wrong, and on a mass scale, one portion of that process could really mess up a lot. So we can't stress it enough that manufacturing is so challenging. There are a lot of people out there who are just like, get the car to the customers, get to the car to the customers. It's like, not only are they starting a whole new company, they're starting manufacturing, which is just like so challenging. So it's going to take time. And I think people don't realize how hard that is, that they just need to understand these legacy makers have been doing it over 100 years. So they've really nailed down and made it an efficient process that they don't have to struggle with as hard as these newcomers. So yeah, it's everyone's going to have to go through it. But if you do have good people on your team that might have come from, Tesla or, people that have already gone through it at a high level from long experience at these other automakers, then they're in better shape, but they're not immune to it. That's for sure.
It's a good point. I completely agree. I think everyone's going to have to go through it. There's just a ton that has to happen. It's kind of like I'm a software engineer, so I write code, and the idea is I'm writing this code one time, and I have to predict that it's going to work on some guy's phone 2 months from now with bad network and stuff. It's a really tough thing to do because you first can't think of every single problem. You have to kind of encounter them and kind of go through them. That's kind of a hardening process, what we call in software. It's kind of the same thing in production and manufacturing. But you have to figure out what you're doing. Some of these companies do have a little bit of an advantage, maybe by hiring people who've been through Teslas and who can maybe kind of steer them clear and help shorten that period. But there's going to be bumps along the way. If you map the production numbers for Lucid and Rivian, for example, you're going to see dips and troughs, and
Yes.
it's gonna ebb and flow because there's going to be times when they've got some critical thing and they got to shut down the lines or something like that. So.
Well, it's especially crazy for a company like Rivian, who is doing 3 products at once at launch. And yes, of course, there are a lot of shared components from R1S and R1T, but still, and then the Amazon van, their production volume is going to be rather low for the first year, and then it will ramp up eventually. But my God, that is just wild to me. 3 products at once is very ambitious. There's bound
It
to be an
is,
issue.
and it's also kind of it. I'm a firm believer in focus, which so Lucid has one car, they're building one thing, and it's not even like the different models. They're going to build the Dream Edition, I think, first. Rivian's doing 2 or 3. It complicates things dramatically. So wish them luck. I hope it does work out, but it does feel like they might potentially have some more hiccups. Matt Husong says, "What are your views on Aptera, the startup EV company?" I'll start with you. What do you think about Aptera?
Well, Aptera's been around for a very long time.
That
So
is true.
like that's the thing that they don't some people are like, "Oh, this new thing." No, unfortunately, like Aptera has been kind of floating around, and they've gotten some renewed interest and spark. And man, it would be really, really cool if they can make it to production. I just don't see that happening soon because I feel like the information that they have given us so far is somewhat limited and also revealing to an extent getting to manufacturing, which is tough, as we just talked about. So I love what Aptera is doing. I love the idea behind it because I do think that, we as Americans also need to shift to kind of a different perspective that maybe we all don't need cars and that we can come up with different solutions for our commutes, whether that be something like an Aptera 3-wheel or an e-bike or anything like that. Advocate on, being efficient with what you need in order to get from place A to B. So I really hope they succeed. I love the idea. I think it's cool and I like the design, but it's still to be seen whether or not it can make it to production.
I also love the idea of the car. I think there's something just fun or exciting about a car you just leave out in the sun, and potentially you could never have to charge it, especially if you get one of the longer range versions. And because the car is so efficient, it's such a small car, it's so compact and aerodynamic that you go further per kilowatt hour than any other EV out there, which means that any power from the sun just goes that much further, and it's all really exciting. I've been dying to get some time with them. The funniest part is, like, I've reached out to companies and I had really good luck. Like, they've reached back and I've talked with them, and I've had like factory tours or random things. Aptera is like 10 miles from me. And Aptera, if you're watching this, I do not know why we have not connected. They've kind of ignored me, and I haven't really had any luck with them. So my opinion about Aptera is I really don't know, because I haven't really had a chance to talk with them very, very deeply. But I think there's a lot of interest around them. There's something about Aptera that I think does resonate with people. RCDIY says that Sandy Monroe is helping them, so that's good. That's a good place to start. It helps to have someone like that in your corner, especially early on. You can probably avoid some pitfalls in mass manufacturing. So I wish them a lot of luck. I'd love to have some time with them. It just hasn't happened yet. So maybe we can change that in the near future. Another super chat from Kyle. Thank you so much, Kyle. I'm so glad you're here. He says, thoughts on automakers going with an in-house closed-loop charging network versus investing in an existing charging network for their drivers such as EA and EVgo. Kyle, if I didn't know who that comment was from and I had to guess, I would have said that's Kyle Connor, for sure. So if you haven't, again, Kyle has an amazing channel called Out of Spec. He's got a couple of, I think, Out of Spec reviews and Out of Spec motoring. But he does a ton of stuff he puts these cars to their paces. And by the way, if you're interested in Lucid, he was there with me at the Lucid factory tour. My video is very topical and kind of general. If you want to know how the Lucid Motors car drives, watch his video. It will give you everything you need to know. He's a rock star car reviewer. He really is. So, and the reason why he's asking this question is because he puts a ton of these cars to their paces, and most of them are Electrify America, right? They're CCS, so that's what he uses. And Kyle's we've talked about this, but like Electrify America has a lot of challenges, and they've got a lot of room for improvement. So I get the point he's making, but I mean it's tough. Besides Tesla, who's going to build out an entire network? I don't think anybody will ever do that again besides Tesla. They had to, because their choices were wait around and EVs will never take off, or screw everybody else and do everything yourself. And that's what Tesla did. And that's why we should applaud what they did. They really made this entire industry possible. But I don't think anybody else will do it. So really, I guess it would come down then, do you buy a Tesla for the network? And other people in the comment section have mentioned, I got a Tesla because I want to drive around the country and I don't trust the other networks. Or do you trust Electrify America to improve and to get better? What do you think?
I mean, I do think that these other companies are going to get better. They're kind of being forced to make sure, as Ricky said, Kyle has some amazing videos, and he's done some really long road trips where he has really tested the reliability of the networks. So definitely go watch his channel. He actually just came out with some really good ones that in the recent days, because he's had like access to the EQS and Plaid and all this really good stuff. So definitely go check out his channel, because he's got some awesome stuff up there, especially right now. But that I would say to that Wisconsin last weekend, and at both of the supercharging stations that I went to, there were at least 3, if not 4, stations that were not working. So in my region right now, they are down, unfortunately. So Tesla's not completely immune to it, but it is definitely a lot more reliable and more simple system to work with in comparison. And that's because they took it in their own hands to develop and create it to make sure that it is super convenient for the customer. Because that's the thing, is you don't want someone to have to hassle with, swiping a credit card or, fiddling with an app in order to try to what gas stations offer started off by giving, like, for example, my car is grandfathered in for unlimited road trip charging for supercharging. So, which is one of the reasons why I got it, because, I do a lot of road trips and it's all free. And so programs like that to get volumes up higher and higher and higher in order for,
I think we might have a little technical difficulty here. Let me see if this helps or not. Can you guys still hear me?
Increased usage and am I frozen?
Yeah. Can you guys? I'm just kind of curious. Can you guys hear us? Okay. Is it better now? I think I'm freezing now too. Can you guys hear me okay? Can someone let me know in the comments section? Let's see. So I'm just gonna keep talking. Let's hope that you guys can hear me. I'm not positive if you can, but yeah, the charging thing is
in order to try to what gas stations offer.
The charging thing is definitely a tricky thing. Yeah, I think we lost Veronica. All right, let me just switch over to me, and then we'll see if we can't get her back. So the stream's buffering terrible. Let me know if it's gotten better for you guys. Let me know. But I've had a chance to do quite a bit of driving with EV, Electrify America. The stream is back, it looks like. Okay. Once we get Veronica back, I'll reinvite her. But my feedback is Tesla's supercharger is by far the best charging network you can get into. There's really not a debate about that. I'm all about standardization. I've talked about this before. We have to have every EV have the same adapter. It has to have the same charge cable. You can't imagine a world where like Honda's gasoline cars have a different, a square hole, and Toyota's is a oblong oval, and you just can't have that. You got to have everybody on the same standard. That's the first thing we need to do. But the funny thing is, I hate the CCS standard. I think it's terrible. If you've ever had to deal with the cable, it is a monstrosity. It's very difficult to twist, and you often have to twist it and get in the right orientation to deal with it. Whereas Tesla's is really elegant. They use the same pins, and with computers, they can detect AC and DC. And so whether you're charging at home over AC or you're bringing in direct current from a fast supercharger, it just knows what to do and handles it. So my philosophy is, let's have a standard, but let's not make it CCS, because CCS is garbage. It's not a good standard at all. And if we're going to make this what we use for the next whatever years, let's not choose a bad one. Let's choose something good that we actually want to use. So how that looks, I don't know, but I kind of almost wish that Tesla could open source their plug, or maybe we could come up with something else like it. And I've heard from others, I think Kyle mentioned when we chatted, that there's some regulatory reason why you can't have AC and DC over the same prongs, and that's why CCS is the way it is. Whatever it is, we got to go to the root of it. Get rid of that law, which is stupid. Tesla's been doing this for 10 years or something. There's nobody who's had more charging than Tesla has. So get rid of whatever stupid laws are in the way and get this right. That would help immensely. The second thing too is with EV, with Electrify America, they have to support every single car out there. They have to support the ID4 and the Mach-E and the Taycan and all of it. So for that reason, what ends up happening is you got to get that digital handshake right. So from what I've talked to some people in the industry who around charging, what most of them have said is that the problem really isn't hardware, it's software. So everything has to be perfect, right? So you have to have this handshake where you plug into your car, the car says, hey, I'm a Mach E, here's the charge curve I want, here's what my charge percent is right now. And then EVA goes, okay, Electrify America goes, okay, sure, here's your charge rate. And then the car says, okay, I'm here now, give me 50 kilowatts, give me 45 and taper down. And all that has to be perfect. The temperature and the thermals in the pack have to be good. And if there's like any kind of a miscommunication or a misstep in the handshake process, the charging session is like terminated. And that's what ends up happening a lot of the time. So imagine, this is Apple's advantage, right? Apple has a lightning cable, hate it if you might. It's still their cable and every one of their iPhones has it, compared to a USB-C cable that has to work for every phone maker out there. So Kyle says Tesla's CCS in the EU is awesome, super lightweight. Kyle, is it still very like directional, meaning it's kind of like you have to twist and rotate, or I'm curious why that is. So clearly there's a way to do this right. So I'm curious about that. But the challenge is one that we will solve. Electrify America will get better at this. The car companies out there are going to have better standardization. This is really the wild west of EVs today. But imagine when people are selling 1 million each, every car maker out there, there's going to be good standards established, and every charging network is going to have that pretty well dialed in. So I'm 100% confident that EA is going to be good one day, and it's going to get better. I think it has gotten better from when I first started using it. When I first started using it, as Veronica mentioned before she dropped, what would end up happening is like 3 out of the 4 stalls would not work, which is absurd, right? Now it's really more like 1 might not work. And on my last few road trips to the Northern California and back, I don't think I had any issues actually. The other issue that I've had in the past is being stranded because my car, the ID4, told me to go to a station that didn't work. And so that's the other thing they got to figure out. If you're going to take me to a station, you better have like recent data saying that people have had charge sessions successfully and things are working. Otherwise, you can strand people, and nothing will piss off a new EV buyer who is maybe on the fence about getting an EV quicker than stranding them on a road trip. So there's a lot to it, but I do think it'll get better. Kyle Connor is going to be on our show soon, and I want to pick his brain. I don't think anybody probably has been to more EA stations and charged more than Kyle has. So I'd love to know his take. Kyle, what do you think? You're in the comment section. What's your take on EA? How is it today? And are you optimistic? Like, what does EA look like in 5 years? Is it going to be pretty great? Is it going to be, RCDIY says wireless charging, will have the extra expense and stuff. There are some interesting breakthroughs with wireless charging that aren't like induction based, but, kind of like a magnetic resonance type of an approach, which are like over 95% efficient. So wireless EV charging might be a thing. I've always said EV chargers should be on the bottom of the car, and it should be like you roll in somewhere and like a plate rises up and connects you. That way it's easier to deal with in a world where cars are autonomous and you don't even have drivers. But yeah, we'll see. There's a lot that needs to happen for this to reach a level of maturity that gas cars have been at for some time. So Robert Klauko just said, especially the residence charging, which what I was alluding to earlier. The current charge location and port and door is all very human related, but I think eventually we're going to get away from that entirely. Imagine every parking stall you just pull up and park in, you could potentially be charging. There's no reason not to. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be on the horizon. So is there anything else? We have a couple more minutes. I will say, I think we lost Veronica and I don't see her coming back on to the stream, but I want to thank her for joining us. I actually first heard about her. She spoke at a Michigan State Senate hearing about EVs and stuff. So Tesla has an exception. They can sell direct, but in Michigan, they were not going to let Lucid and Rivian have the same advantage. And so she spoke on their behalf, which is super cool. It's part of when I first found out about her and thought she was awesome. So definitely check out her channel. I have a link to it. Kyle, I see you. You're going to be on. I want you on the show in the very near future. there's gonna be some fun discussions I think to have. Kyle just completed this like month-long trip to Germany where he was driving everything under the sun. He has incredible levels of access, so I'd love to pick his brain. I was giving Mercedes a hard time recently about their EQS being really ugly compared to what they started out showing off. So I'm curious how he feels about some of the other German EVs that are coming out. Christian Richard has an amazing idea. He says we need to have a Kyle Connor versus Tom Malogny charging infrastructure future stream. Let's do it. Tom and Kyle. We need to make that happen. Yeah. So Kyle says Tom and I are planning on that topic on a podcast soon. So you guys might not have to wait very long. But yeah, the Mercedes EQS baffles me. Why is it unattractive? The front of the car looks like a economy compact car. And it started off so beautiful. It had a really nice hood line and it felt like a really like well-proportioned car. And it just got ugly. And I don't understand why companies do this. Why do you show off something cool and then make something ugly? Like beautiful sheet metal doesn't cost more to stamp, I don't think. I never understood why they do that. That's one thing I appreciate about Tesla is they'll show something and then they'll make it. That's it. We're not showing you, hey, here's something we could make. We're not going to do it, but here's something we could make. And here's an ugly version that you can actually buy. It's such a weird way. This is part of why I wanted to have this topic is legacy makers do a lot of things that are foolish, I think, that need to be reimagined. The dealer network, don't get me started on that one. I think that one's going to hurt them long term. But there's a lot more than that. This whole idea of like, let's build a show car and never make it. Why spend money on that? Why not put money into cars that you're actually going to make? It's always baffled me. I've never understood that part about it. I just want to quickly go over some of the last minute comments here, and we will be. So Lacey is on. Thank you, Lacey,